Good afternoon. My name is Donna Marie Collins. I'm the hearing examiner that will be presiding over this afternoon's zoning hearing. The application is to rezone approximately 35 acres to the mixed-use plan development category. The applicant's representatives will be presenting the details of the case, but I'm going to take a moment just to explain how we're going to conduct the hearing this afternoon. For those of you who may not be familiar, I'm going to swear in everyone in the room because all testimony and evidence that we take in during these cases must be under oath and before we begin the hearing. And we will begin with the applicant's presentation that typically involves an attorney and several expert witnesses, whether they be planners or environmental sciences or what have you. They will explain the details of the application and the request and explain why it should be approved because of its consistency with the county's land development regulations. Following their presentation, the county planner who reviewed the application and prepared the staff report will also make a presentation. I may have questions of both parties, the applicant and staff. The staff recommendation is one of approval with conditions. The staff planner will explain the basis of their reasoning for the conditions, and then at the conclusion of their presentation, I will turn my attention to the public. At that point, any member of the public that would like to speak on the record, I will call your names if you filled out one of the public participation forms, and you can come to the podium and speak. We'll try to put an aerial up on the screen so that you can show us where you live in relationship to the project. At that time, I would like for you to share either your support or opposition to the project. What I find most times is someone is not totally in favor or totally opposed to the request, but they have specific concerns. I urge you to share those concerns with us so that we may clarify whether they will already be addressed through county regulations, or that will give us an opportunity perhaps to fashion a condition to address those concerns. Because this is an application for a new plan development, I am not the final decision maker. I will be preparing a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. They will conduct a hearing approximately 3 to 4 weeks after I issue my recommendation. If you would like to have an opportunity to speak to the final decision makers at the final hearing, you must participate by putting testimony or evidence into the record at this hearing. That's not to say that you have to speak, but if you want the opportunity to speak before the commission, you must participate at this level. I think that's everything. So I'd like to, anyone who intends to speak on the record, enter testimony or evidence, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony and evidence that you place into the record this afternoon will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. I'm ready to begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Hearing Examiner. For the record, my name is Richard Aiken. I'm an attorney with Henderson Franklin here in Fort Myers. I'm here this afternoon representing the applicant on case number DCI2022-00039, which is the Burnt Store mixed-use plan development. The applicant did submit a 48-hour letter indicating that it is in agreement with the staff report issued in this matter, and there are no areas of disagreement. In addition, I will note that the staff submitted a 48-hour letter of their own with a memorandum included from planning staff regarding Table 1B and the analysis of Table 1B under the comprehensive plan. We did also review that memorandum, and the applicant is in agreement with the statements therein and the analysis of lead plan policies 1.6.5 and 2.2.2. Before I get started, I would like to provide you with a copy of the applicant's PowerPoint presentation, and I also have a full-sized copy of the master concept plan as well as an 11x17.
Okay, this will be applicant exhibit 1, the PowerPoint, and 2, the master concept plan.
All right, so we have our project team here today. Linda Miller is our AICP planner with Avalon Engineering. She will be doing the majority of our presentation. You'll hear from her in just a minute. Paul Owen is our environmental consultant. He is with Owen Environmental Consulting, and he will talk about his environmental findings on site. Yuri Baikow is our transportation consultant with TR Transportation Consultancy, is also here. So a little bit about the parcel. The parcels that are the subject of this request make up 35.49 acres. They have frontage on Burnt Store Road, and you can see Burnt Store Road here runs north and south. The opposite side of Burnt Store Road over here is within the city limits of Cape Coral. The current future land use of the parcel is central urban and wetlands, and the current zoning is Ag 2. There is a 2.1 or 2.01 acre creek that bisects the site, and you'll hear more about this from the other consultants in the matter. It's going to create a natural buffer, and as you'll hear, in the MPD, we're going to have commercial on one side of the creek and the residential on the other side in order to use the creek as a natural buffer between the two requested uses. I want to just briefly go through a little bit of history on this parcel. So there was an approval of a comprehensive plan amendment in March of 2023 for this parcel. It was a future land use map amendment from open lands and wetlands to central urban and wetlands. The city of Cape Coral has proposed across the street from this, across Burnt Store Road, a new future land use within their comprehensive plan that's going to be referred to as the Burnt Store Road District, or the BURST. And basically the BURST is a new future land use classification that will allow for properties along the Burnt Store Road corridor to have higher multifamily density up to 25 units per acre, as well as a variety of commercial and light industrial uses. So when we went through the plan amendment in this case, both staff and the applicant analyzed the central urban future land use and determined it to be the most consistent of the Lee Plan future land uses with what the city had planned in the surrounding area. So that was the sort of the history of how we got to central urban and went through that plan amendment.
Has the burst been adopted yet?
So what happened with that, it was actually, I believe, adopted by the city of Cape Coral, and then there was a Florida statute in place as a result of some of the hurricane issues that put a moratorium on it, and so it has to go back before city council again to the city of Cape Coral, and I believe that that is planned for maybe later on this summer or early this fall. All indications are, I mean, city council already, I think, voted in favor of it once, so that it will be approved, and planning staff has developed zoning regulations for it, but I don't believe it is actually in effect at this time.
So that'll permit properties in the city of Cape Coral to rezone, and in the context of residential density could be up to 25 units per acre?
Correct. And we'll show you in a few minutes, we have a slide that shows the existing future land uses within the city of Cape Coral and sort of what those uses are surrounding it, as well as what the burst overlay would look like, so you can see that. And the city of Cape Coral has planned this area on Burnt Store Road up towards Charlotte County to be an urban corridor. They see this as the future of an area that's going to have a lot of commercial uses and be significantly different than how it looks today. And that's sort of the basis for how we got here with this plan amendment and the basis for many of the changes that the city is looking at.
I noticed when I did my site visit that Burnt Store Road is a multi-lane divided highway south and north of this property, but the segment itself is only one lane in each direction. What's the timeline on those improvements?
So Mr. Baikow may be able to answer this a little bit better, but I did have a project in the city of Cape Coral and we discussed it. So I believe the timeline is hopefully within the next, I want to say 2030, and Mr. Baikow, yeah, he's telling me yes. So that is correct. That's the idea. That's the timeline, is by 2030 for those improvements to that portion of Burnt Store Road.
Thank you.
All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our project planner, who's Linda Miller, to walk through the specifics of the project.
Hi, good afternoon. Linda Miller, Vice President of Avalon Engineering and the certified planner for this project. We're requesting a rezoning from AG2 to mixed use PD to permit 35.49 acres for a 354 multifamily development with a maximum of 263,470 here. The area to the west is in Cape Coral, The subject parcels are currently vacant, with the closest commercial development being the Dollar General on the west side of Burnt Store Road. We have an 18 lot residential development just south of our project site, and Burnt Store Marina is a residential community northwest of the subject parcels. Within 1.6 miles south of us, though, we have a variety of different land uses. So 0.3 of a mile away from our site, we have 87.48 acres in Cape Coral that have a commercial activity land use currently on the site. This is a mixed-use land use that supports a minimum of 12 dwelling units per acre and a minimum of 75 units, and a maximum of 16 dwelling units per acre, and an intensity of 1 FAR. Within 0.68 of a mile, there are 56 acres in Cape Coral designated as commercial land use. This area supports a variety of commercial, retail, office, and support uses with an FAR of 1. Within 0.53 of a mile, there are 21.12 acres currently designated as single-family, multifamily land use, which is zoned RML. And if they brought that into RML zoning, they would have 16 dwelling units per acre. There's also a 502 site RV resort located just 1 mile south of the project site. So if you look at this area, in summary, 1.6 miles next to the subject property, south of Burnt Store Road, there's a total of 125.2 acres that support a greater density and intensity than the subject parcels. Upon approval of the MPD, the subject parcels would have consistent zoning district with the adjacent parcels within the area of the city and the county. And this is an example of the current land use, which is on the left-hand side. You can see the purple is the CAC, the red is the commercial professional, and the orangish rust mustard color is the mixed-use land use. And then to the right-hand side is the burst. So the city brought forward a new land use category for properties that were south of Calusa Parkway all the way to the Charlotte County line, and those properties would be in a new land use category for the burst, which, as Richard says, allows for greater density and intensity than we have. We have a zoning map. Our zoning is AG2. The surrounding zoning districts on our property are also AG2. Across the street on Burnt Store on the left western side is commercial zonings within the city of Cape Coral. We're also in the Burnt Store Road planning community. This community is in the northwest corner of the mainland of unincorporated Lee County. This area is expected to have substantial growth through the year of 2030. We have utility services in place for water, sewer, and reuse water available through an interlocal agreement with Charlotte County. And currently there are no specific development regulations for the Burnt Store Road Community Plan. This is our master concept plan. So we designed the master concept plan to be compliant with the Land Development Code. What the master concept plan does is it specifies the square footage of the buildings that are being provided. It lays out those building footprints, and it provides buffer areas and preserve areas. It also shows access, and you can see by this plan that we're providing cross access at the northern western part of our site, which would connect to the property to the north, and we're also providing access on the southern western corner that would provide access to the property to the south. So we've laid out all the buildings. The next couple of slides will go through the actual requests within this, which is shown on the mixed-use plan. This is our schedule of permitted uses for commercial and light industrial. We have a variety of different commercial uses and light industrial uses. We also have the ability to have signs in there and gatehouses in there. We're proposing to put in some enclosed storage areas, some public warehouse areas, some flex space rental units that have a variety of commercial uses. This is the permitted uses for the
Go back, please.
Sure.
Which uses on this list are considered light industrial?
So you have the measuring, analysis, and controlling instruments. You also have the research and development group 2 and 4. You have some other office areas, business services group that is part of the industrial, light industrial uses. This is permitted uses for the residential tract. We have multifamily, townhouses, clubhouse, gatehouse, interest gates, and signs. This is a site information and dimensional requirements for our commercial tract. We have a maximum commercial building square footage of 263,470 square feet. Maximum building height is 44 feet, 3 stories. Maximum building coverage is 26%. Our parking meets the requirements within the land development code. We have building setbacks from both the front, side, and rear, and buffer yard requirements for both the front, side, and rears of the property. We also provided some information regarding the commercial development. That site area is 663,033 square feet. We have 30% open space requirement. Out of that open space requirement, we have 50% indigenous planting requirement. We have a total open space provided of 6.12 acres. 2.29 is the native planting area. 0.31 is the required landscape buffer. And then the other open space is 3.52 acres. We did the same thing for the residential tract. We have a maximum number of units, 354. We provide the setbacks from the front, which is on Burnt Store Road, the side, the north side, the south side, and the rear. We have a maximum building height of 54 feet, 4 stories of residential units. Our building coverage is 11%, and we show the buffer requirements on the north side, south, east, and west side of the property. We also went and added some additional information on the residential. That land area is 883,067 square feet. We're providing 40% required open space, or 8.10 acres. 50% of that open space requirement will be for indigenous plantings. For a total, we're providing 11 acres, 11.60 acres of open space. 4.06, 0.37, and 7.17 of other open space. We're requesting 2 deviations with this project. Deviation number 1 will seek relief from section 10-261, which is a solid waste requirement, which would require us to provide 1,705.6 square feet of dumpster enclosure area for the mini warehouse and the public warehouse. We are requesting to provide only 228 square feet of dumpster enclosure area for those 2 particular uses. And we will provide the rest of the dumpster requirements for the flex space units on the commercial site. We have reached out to the Lee County Solid Waste Development Services, and they provided a letter of no objection, and staff is recommending approval of that deviation. Deviation number 2 seeks relief from Lee County Code section 10-2913, required street access, which requires 2 means of ingress and egress for residential development over 5 acres, and commercial and industrial development that's more than 10 acres. Since Burnt Store Road is a limited access roadway, we've worked with Lee County DOT and also been working with the FDOT in designing this roadway section, with answering questions and finding out information from them. So we've designed this project with 2 shared driveways, and because of that, we are not able to meet the 2 requirements for driveways or the connection due to the creek. So we've asked for a deviation. We reached out to the fire department and the police department and the emergency management area to ask them if they would be okay with a stabilized entrance area for secondary entrance, and they said yes, they would. And so we've provided a stabilized access point for each one of the tracks. Staff is recommending approval of this deviation. TR Transportation is here, Yuri is here today to answer any questions you may have, but he did a complete traffic impact study statement for this particular project. It went through quite a few reviews with the county staff, and we have an approved TIS. And our trips that our new trips, two-way trips, is 2,790. If you have any questions for Yuri, he'll be able to answer them for you. And I would like to invite Paul to come up from Paul Owen Construction Environmental.
Good afternoon. I'm Paul Owen with Owen Environmental Consulting. I've been considered an expert in this format many times and asked to be considered an expert again.
Yes, please proceed.
Okay, so what you're looking at is a map that shows the location of the bald eagle's nest, which is north and east of the northeast property corner of the site. That corner, northeast corner of the site, barely falls within the 660-foot zone, protection zone of the bald eagle nest. And so as a result, we did a bald eagle management plan and took that through the Environmental Technical Advisory Committee, which was approved. And what we have is most of that area that falls in the 660-foot zone is a preservation area. There's about 1/4 of an acre of that is development site. And so basically during construction, if major construction activities are happening during the nesting season, we'll monitor the nest and make sure that the eagles aren't being disturbed by it. And so I don't consider this to be a major impact to the eagles based on the activity and the distance to this nest compared to the site. You can also see the, let me see if I can figure this out. The pointer. Right, so the creek runs through the site, right through the middle of the site. There's jurisdictional wetlands that fringe it. And we obtained a jurisdictional determination from the South Florida Water Management District a few years ago that verified that that is the limits of the wetlands. There's also the creek through the middle of it. The site consists of pine flatwoods on either side, pine trees, saw palmetto, that sort of thing. So we also did a protected species survey of this site and discovered 3 potentially occupied gopher tortoise burrows in the north part of the site, and looks like 6 potential cavity trees for Florida bonneted bats. So what that means is we'll have to get a permit from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission to relocate these gopher tortoises. May be possible to keep them on site based on the area of the preserve, but if necessary, we'll move them off site if it's required. For the bonneted bat potential cavities, if one of the agencies require us to do a acoustic survey to verify that those are or aren't being used by bats, we would do that. This is a wetland map, shows the location of the creek running through the site and the wetlands that fringe it. As Linda mentioned, there's no proposed crossing of the creek, and so any kind of permitting with the Water Management District wouldn't include a bridge or anything like that, so it makes the environmental portion of any ERP permitting fairly straightforward. There's
So you
no
don't
impacts.
anticipate wetland impacts?
No.
The site plan is preserving.
Preserves the entire creek and the wetlands that surround it.
With regard to the Florida bonneted bat, your survey detected trees that could be
Yeah,
would
it's
serve?
potential. Yes, that's what it's called a roost survey. We include that with our protected species survey. And any tree that has a cavity that's large enough for a bat to potentially get in it. I mean, that's anything. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. It just means that it's possible. So what happens is if the South Florida Water Management District, they will confer with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. And if they think that the site is worthy of doing an acoustic survey, which is kind of a big deal, it takes a lot of time and effort, where you go on site and you record the calls and you take it back and you put it through software that runs an algorithm on the calls to identify the species. And we run through all that and verify whether or not that there's any Florida bonneted bats on that site, potentially in those cavities.
So if there is, then what happens?
Ooh. If there is, a lot of times we'll get these, 90% of the time, if we do get any kind of potential bonneted bat calls, they'll turn out to be like insect noise, and we vet them to not be bat. But if we can't say that they're not, a lot of times they're flying around during periods that indicate that there's not roosting on site. Like, for example, if you get a call that's within half an hour of dawn or dusk, that means they may be on your site. If that happens, then you would follow some protocol about when you can cut the tree down, basically during the non-nesting season, and only at night after any bats may have flown out, because they fly out at dusk, fly back at dawn. So you take the trees out in between them. And if necessary, confer with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service if that were to happen.
So what do you get, like a take permit?
In this case, you're avoiding take because you are following their protocols of cutting the tree down in the non-nesting season when they're not in the nest.
I wonder if it's less of a concern because you're surrounded by preserves.
Well, they are a federally listed species, so you do have to follow their protocol. And if the path that you probably would end up taking would be technical assistance with the Fish and Wildlife Service if you did think that there was potentially bats on
Right
site.
now, we're just saying these trees have characteristics that are compatible with bat use. We don't know if bats are using them.
Correct. We don't know if we don't even know if there's unlisted bats using them. All we know is that these are trees with cavities in them, most likely caused by woodpeckers. And so the likelihood of there being bats in there is fairly low. The likelihood of there being Florida-bottomed bats in there is extremely low.
Thank you.
Yeah, and this shows the the site relative to the bald eagle zone. So as you can see, most of that area, the green area, that's all preserved, and then just this little corner of the site is in the actual zone there.
And that looks like it's potentially parking area? That what that corner is?
That corner, I think it's probably going to be a berm, I would think, maybe a side slope. There might be a detention, a part of a stormwater detention pond or something. And that concludes my presentation, if you have any questions.
Thank you, Paul.
So to continue with this particular slide, we put this one in here so we could discuss the creek. So the existing creek area and then the buffer required around the creek on each side. So you can see where the perfect purple lines are, purple hatch lines are. That is the buffer area of the creek, not just the creek itself, but the area outside of the creek that's being maintained. So you can see that we have development that's occurring outside. And to answer your question about what's in that corner there, that's all green space. So the darker green color is the preserve requirement for the existing trees, and then the white space is additional open space for planting areas, which will include a berm and additional plantings.
Thank you.
You're welcome. As part of this MPD, we also did a stormwater management narrative looking at this project as for stormwater. Now this project, as it goes through a development order process, will require South Florida Water Management District for both tracks separately, because the interconnection will be the creek, but they will have their own systems that will flow into the creek for their development. So as part of the stormwater management section, Land Development Code 34-373, we looked at these 5 elements and analyzed them. And we found that, the site will have a perimeter berm. Well, we'll put a perimeter berm around the commercial, and we'll also have a perimeter berm around the residential. So those will operate separately, even though they have the connection into the creek to help with that continual flow of water. I can answer any other questions you have about stormwater if you'd like to. These are all the project. The project is very consistent with the Land Development Code, and we're going to have quite a few slides that go through that consistency. To start off, we are going to tell you about the consistency with the Burnt Store planning community. We believe that these parcels on both sides of Burnt Store Road, north of Durden Parkway, whether in the city of Cape Coral or in the jurisdiction of Lee County, will be developed with similar densities and intensities to other parcels within the city of Cape Coral to the south and west and in Charlotte County. We also looked at the city of Punta Gorda and their growth along Burnt Store Road, expanding the urban core of the city of Cape Coral to reach the Charlotte County line. This area will offer commercial services not currently available in either of the 2 other jurisdictions within this area. Consistency with the Lee Plan Policy 1.13, Central Urban Future Land Use category. Mixed-use developments are a required use within the Central Urban Future Land Use category. Burnt Store Road is in an area of Lee County which is planned to support a variety of commercial uses as well as residential options. The subject parcels should be included in this core and will be utilized to provide jobs, grow businesses, to expand the residential options by providing multifamily units within an area planned for future growth. Objective 2.1, development location. This this objective really talks about the SPRA and containing the SPRA, and the subject parcel is located near an arterial corridor where urban services currently exist, and we feel that this zoning is consistent with Objective 2.1 of the Lee Plan. Objective 2.2, direct new growth to the portions of the future urban areas where there's adequate public facilities. Burnt Store Road area will be a new growth area within Lee County within the next 5 years. The Burnt Store Road improvements plan to continue and expand and improve Burnt Store Road from Pine Island Road to US 41, connecting Cape Coral to Charlotte County, will provide the adequate facilities needed to develop the parcels with direct access to Burnt Store Road. Utility services are in place for water, sewer, and reuse water on the site currently. Consistency with Standard 4.11 water and Standard 4.12 sewer. An interlocal agreement between Charlotte County and Lee County is in place to provide water, wastewater, and reuse water. The developer is working with the county on the capacity reservation for these. We do have a letter from the county saying that we do need to connect when we're developing to their services. Consistent with the Lee Plan Policy 5.1.2, prohibits residential development where it's constrained and hazards. We're not in a coastal high hazard area, and we're not in a flood zone. So we're utilizing the creek that's existing there and maintaining that creek to help with the drainage of those two properties and to maintain that creek. Policy 5.1.5, protect existing and future residential areas from encroachment of uses that could be destructive to their character. We're separating our residential from our residential uses by a natural waterway, and we will provide buffers required for properties to the south and to the north. Policy 6.14, 6.16, 6.17 all refer back to commercial uses that are compatible with adjacent land areas by providing the proper buffer. The commercial area contains 15.22 acres, and we have the appropriate depth to do a commercial development. We're not doing strip development. We have a longer property to be able to develop a variety of commercial uses. We plan for buffer areas and maintaining the vegetation that's required on the site. Consistency with policies 7.11, 7.12, 7.18, and 7.19 all deal with industrial development, and we looked at these. Our development for industrial uses is mainly closer to Burnt Store Road, separated with other commercial developments against the residential development. We've provided 50 feet plus the creek plus another 50 feet before they even got to any residential units. We maintained the proper screening required for an industrial development, and we actually worked the industrial in with the commercial uses too. Policy 11.1.1, development located with intense development, central urban and urban communities are strongly encouraged to be developed with 2 or more uses. So we looked at this policy and we put in commercial, light industrial, and residential, so we meet the requirements for 2 or more. Policy 11.1.2 talks about residential densities when you have a central urban land use, and you're allowed to use the residential density as on all your properties if you're providing 3 uses or more. And we meet that policy with our commercial being either office, retail, storage areas, and light industrial plus the residential. For consistency with the transportation element 39.1.1, we provided a traffic impact statement that's been reviewed by county staff and accepted, and we're consistent with policy 39.13. direct high-intensity uses to areas that provide for future transit corridors. And of course, we're on Burnt Store Road, and those improvements should be completed by 2030.
Is there transit service to that section of?
No,
Burnsville?
there's not a transit service.
So how is it consistent with that policy?
Just because that we're on an arterial road that could have transit services in the future. Community facilities, element 53.1.9, new development will pay for appropriate mechanics of bringing portable water to the site. We have water available to the outside of our property. Of course, we will have to pay for the fees to bring it inside and provide those water, sewer, and reuse waters to those buildings, the new buildings and the residential development. Policy 54.1.4, continue to require all development to pay for appropriate fees and connect to a reuse water system. Charlotte County has provided a reuse water line directly down Burnt Store Road. We are required to connect to the reuse water for Charlotte County. So if they have capacity, we will be served by Charlotte County for reuse water. Policy 57.1.5, continue to encourage the developer-driven expansion of infrastructure to provide reuse water. Here again, we are going to connect to reuse water and plan to have services provided from Charlotte County. Policy 65.1.4 refers to the zoning and development rules for independent fire districts, and our site is served by the Cape Coral Fire Department. We have a letter of availability from the Cape Coral Fire Department. Going on to the Park and Recs element, development regulations and objective 77.1. We're providing open space in the multifamily area of 11.6 acres for amenities and for natural protection of the existing species out there. The development of the site with policy 77.3.1, we're preserving the existing vegetation in our open space provided areas. Housing element, policy 135.1.9, the county will ensure a mixture of residential uses. Currently, there's no multifamily housing projects within this area of Lee County or in Cape Coral. Approving this mixed-use development will comply with this policy. Historic preservation element, policy 1.4.1.2. Even though there's no historical resources noted on the site, this development will comply with all the policies and procedures if any resources are discovered during construction. And our last one, economic element, policy 158.3.5. Lee County will ensure that there's adequate land is allocated in this plan to meet future commercial, industrial, agricultural, residential, and recreational needs. This amendment will allocate acreage for commercial and light industrial. Turn it back to Richard.
Good afternoon again, Richard Aiken for the record. So, as I mentioned in the introduction earlier on, we did review staff's memorandum regarding Table 1B, and it's my understanding the question was raised about Table 1B and the acreage allocation therein for the central urban future land use and commercial uses that will be, and multifamily uses that will be put on this parcel. As I stated earlier, we went through the plan amendment to change the future land use map to central urban from open lands and wetlands. As part of that amendment, I think as an oversight, the Table 1B was not updated at that point in time. All right, so it was something that was not done, even though at the time when we went through everything, the analysis was done for it to go to central urban with the anticipated uses that we're proposing as part of this zoning. Policy 1.6.5 of the Lee plan, and I've got it up here, but it provides in part that no development orders or extensions to development orders will be issued or approved by Lee County that would allow the acreage totals for residential, commercial, or industrial uses contained in Table 1B to be exceeded. The policy speaks to development orders, and at this point in time, we're asking for rezoning. We're not at the development order stage, but where we're asking to actually bring things out of the ground. We do recognize and understand that the Table 1B allocation will have to be solved before the development order stage of this project, so assuming that the zoning is ultimately approved, when we get to development order, if the Table 1B acreage allocation has not been updated, it wouldn't be able to be issued a development order at that time. We do understand that. There are several other plan amendments in the works right now here in Lee County that would solve the Table 1B acreage allocation, specifically with regard to this property, that are being reviewed by staff. and we believe ultimately will likely be approved. If that doesn't happen, we'll have to come back and address it at some other time. However, at this time for the zoning stage, nothing in policy 1.6.5 or 2.2.2 provide that the lack of appropriate acreage allocation in Table 1B is a basis for denial of a rezoning. That's our assessment of it, and staff has agreed. And so we believe that it is appropriate to approve the rezoning request at this time, with the understanding that the Table 1B review will have to be done at the development order stage.
Anything further?
That's all. This is our summary, but I think we've been through all of it. So if there are any other questions for us, I'll be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I can turn it over to Mr. Danley for staff's presentation.
Staff PowerPoint will be Staff Exhibit 2. Staff Exhibit 1 is the staff report. Thank you for the extra copy.
You're very welcome. Prior to us getting started with our standard presentation, we do have our planning staff here to kind of be available for questions on the 48-hour letter. Katie Woolner is a principal planner in the planning section. We're hoping to get her accepted as an expert witness today and then be available for any questions that she may have. So if I could call her up.
Good afternoon. What I'd like you to do is state your name for the record. If you can give us a brief overview of your educational background and also your work experience as it pertains to planning and in specifically the Lee Plan and the Land Development Code.
So for the record, Catherine Wellner, AICP. My educational background, I have a bachelor's in political science from Florida State. I have a master's in planning from Cornell University. I've been working in the area for the last 7 years for a few different jurisdictions. I started in Venice and then went to Cape Coral, Hendry County, most recently the city of Northport. So I have a lot of experience in comprehensive planning and current planning. I started with Lee County in December, so I've been here for almost 6 months in the planning section.
And what is it you do in terms of working with the Lee Plan?
So I have been reviewing applications for consistency with the Lee Plan, working on a couple LDC amendments to make the LDC consistent with the Lee Plan, our department focuses specifically on the Lee Plan, so it's something that I look at just about every day.
All right, so that's your steady diet for the last 6-7 months.
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Did you have any questions about the memo?
No, the memo was very clear. Thank you. I understand that there's going to be a cleanup amendment to the plan, whether it piggybacks onto something that's already in the pike or you initiate a new one, but at any rate, it'll be addressed before a development order stage.
Yes, that's all.
That's my understanding.
That's our
No
understanding.
questions.
Okay. I'll try not to repeat too much of what the applicant says, but I do want to put some stuff on the record, make sure the record's complete. The applicant is requesting a rezone from agricultural to mixed-use plan development, 354 multifamily dwelling units, and then 263,470 square feet of commercial and industrial uses. You asked a question earlier about what uses were considered industrial in nature, and the applicant did put a couple on the record, but I wanted to also just clarify that the storage uses that are permitted or intended in the schedule of uses, including public warehouse, mini warehouse, and open storage, they straddle the line between commercial and industrial uses. The zoning districts that they're typically permitted in a conventional sense are really the ones that allow for both commercial and industrial uses, and so our planning staff and zoning staff came to the agreement that that would also be sufficient for the third use, so to speak, on that Lee Plan
Thank you for
policy.
that clarification.
Okay. The applicant is seeking 2 deviations. We'll go into that a little bit further later on in the presentation. So this is the subject property. The applicant's already gone through their master concept plan, but just superimposed to see what it would look like in context. This is effectively what it looked like. The applicant talked about the shared access points. There's one here that is across the street from Charlie Road, and then it's kind of hard to see, but the shared access point straddles the property line on the south as well. The northern development is the commercial and industrial tract, and then the southern portion is that multifamily tract. The applicant's gone through these. We will be doing analysis on the decision-making criteria through the lens of the LEED plan as we go through the rest of our presentation. But just to start out with, we do find that this request meets those criteria. And if you have any questions or clarification while we go through, feel free to ask. The applicant did bring up CPA 21-9. That's what was approved back in March of 2023 to take this property from open lands into central urban. Given what we're looking at here on the maps, it does seem kind of out of place, but the applicant did bring up the history of the burnt store. I forget what the rest of the acronyms for, but the comp plan changes that are happening within the city of Cape Coral that are really intensifying the area, adding a lot of density and intensity. And staff was in agreement at the time of the CPA that this is the most appropriate comp plan or future land use category to be consistent with that category on this Cape Coral side as it comes into development. And really, we'll talk about objective 2.1 and 2.2, but that is an interesting policy in the context of this request, because this does feel like it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, because there's no development really to the north or the south and minimal development to the west. But in the context of what's happening on the city of Cape Coral side, staff, and like I said, we'll talk about it a little bit more, but staff is the opinion that this is not an inappropriate timing for the applicant to be seeking this zoning. So today it's now designated as central urban. Our LEED plan designates that as the urban core within the county. Considers commercial, light industrial, and residential uses. The schedule of uses provided by the applicant does consider all of those uses. The applicant is seeking that 10 units per acre standard density from the entire development based on that policy 11.1.2. And the applicant did put on the record quite extensively what's happening on the Cape Coral side, but development could come up pretty far north with pretty significant development. And then to the north even of this property, there's already existing residential development. And then right across the street, there's a variety store. And I believe that property is zoned community commercial.
Here's my question.
Okay.
During the applicant's presentation, they spoke about the burn store access management plan.
Yes.
And for that reason, it was going to be shared access to the north and the south.
Yes.
It looked like half the driveway was going to be on this property and half on the other, which I understand that with the open lands category to the south, but my understanding was the abutting lands to the north was conservation lands and likely will not be developed. So how is that going to work?
So the burnt store management plan is actually a controlled access management plan approved by the Board of County Commissioners. And actually the locations as they're approved are actually geolocated within the resolution. My understanding is the way they have it lined up, even though it straddles their property line, was previously considered in that exact configuration. And if they were to continue on with a different location, that access point would have to be amended in the controlled access management plan with the county. So, and that, we'll talk about it a little bit more with the deviation for the two access points, but that controlled access management plan is kind of set in stone where everything can go.
Well, I understand that, but it seems like the site plan is showing it as an access is going to straddle the adjacent property, and that's unlikely if the property to the north is conservation lands. So it's going to be entirely on this site, I would think.
That's an interesting point. My suspicion is at the time of development order, they're going to need to provide some type of shared access point, because like I said, that access point is actually geolocated in that resolution. If they were trying to shift that southward, then they would need to amend the camp for burn store.
It would be half half the width of the driveway is all it would be shifted. They probably wouldn't amend it for that. I'm just pointing out that it's unlikely going to be a shared access, that's all.
Okay, understood.
All right.
Is there any other questions about that? The staff report notes it, and just reflected in this slide as well, but there are urban services in the area. The applicant did talk about the interlocal agreement between Charlotte County and Lee County to provide water and sewer in this area. There is appropriate EMS, sheriffs, and fire within the area to service the subject property, and there is sufficient school capacity for the residential component on the south side.
Cape Coral Fire Department's gonna serve the property, did I hear that right?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay.
Policy 1.5 speaks to compatibility effectively with surrounding residential uses. Fortunately, there's no residential uses to the north, to the south, or to the east currently today, but there is some to the west. It's approximately 450 feet from property line to property line. There's a single-family home here. I believe this is also residential use, but there's sufficient separation to provide compatibility just between those two things with the Burnt Store Road and the variety store there. At that same intersection. Aside from that, there is residential uses to the south that are adjacent to potential industrial uses, but the way that the site's designed, staff's of the opinion that there's compatibility even within itself between those multiple uses. We did review the application through the Goal 6 of the Lee Plan and found it consistent with those criteria as well. And then the same goes for Goal 7 as well. And just to repeat, that mixture of industrial and residential uses is somewhat limited in how they can interact with each other, where you can't drive through residential uses to get to industrial uses based on these policies. But the way that this is designed is those are staying in discrete areas. You won't have to ride through one to get to the other. The applicant did go through, and we've already talked about the 11.1.2 as it pertains to being able to derive density off the entire property, but we are of the opinion that they're able to do that based off of their schedule of uses. The applicant did provide a water quality monitoring plan, and in addition, we have conditions in our staff report to ensure that appropriate surface water quality monitoring plan is provided at time of development order, but we do find that the proposed rezoning is consistent with Goal 125. And just speaking to Goal 158, with the expansion of new commercial uses, it provides for an expansion of jobs in the area, employment adjacent to residential uses. We're not having necessarily drive to new areas to get jobs, and also this just provides an opportunity for additional jobs within the county. The two deviations that the applicant spoke to, the first was a reduced dumpster area enclosure, or a dumpster enclosure area. The location of it on the master concept plan, I kind of zoomed in, is kind of straddling all the three uses, but it's within the development for the storage facility. And it's located here. We did find that they provided sufficient information to recommend approval of the deviation. And then we've already talked about this some, but the two stabilized access points are proposed here and here. Staff's of the opinion that both of the pieces separately would need to provide two access points just based off of the code. And with what they've proposed with the stabilized access points, we find that this is sufficient for a deviation. DOT opined that they didn't want that to become a new access point in the future, so staff has included a condition to provide some type of chain or fence to make sure that it doesn't be used by the general public on a day-to-day. And with that, we're here with any questions. We do recommend approval with conditions, and that sums it up.
Thank you. Okay, I'm ready for public. At this stage, I'm going to call the names from the sheets that I have here. If you haven't filled one out, that's okay. I'll make a last call to anyone in the public that wants to speak. My first sheet is Anne Marie Campbell. Yes, please come to the podium if you wish to speak. Okay. And then I have, oh dear, Robert.
Sure, it's close enough.
Okay.
I have no reason to have a comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. While you're here, if you do have any questions, you've got the applicant's entire consulting team here. I urge you to speak to them at the close of hearing if you need them to clarify anything. But if you want to speak on the record, now's your time to do it. Oh, one more? Okay. Stephen Weisberg.
Hi, just for clarification, if we thought we were going to, after your recommendation, speak before the Board of County Commissioners, what does that entail as far as making a presentation here? Is just the fact that you have that in writing enough for that, or?
No, you have to have made some comments on the record, like you have specific concerns regarding stormwater runoff or compatibility or something like that. And then you can speak as long as you would like at this hearing, but then at the board, you only get 3 minutes. So you want to make sure that you focus on what really matters to you if you feel as though it wasn't adequately addressed in the recommendation.
So if you're just here in support of the project, that's not enough?
No, you can say, I mean, you can say you support the project. You could say that at the board hearing too.
Okay, that's pretty much why I'm here.
Nobody will get the hook out for you if you say
Okay.
that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that's from the public that would like to speak? Closing public input. I'm back to staff and the applicant. Do you want to make any concluding remarks? Is there anything else you'd like to enter into the record?
Madam Hearing Examiner Richard Ake again for the record. We don't have anything else to add. In the event that you have questions, we are happy to address them.
I don't have any questions. I want to thank staff and the applicant for preparing a very comprehensive staff report for me. I read it all the way through prior to hearing, and I felt well prepared. I have already conducted a site visit in anticipation of this hearing. I do not think I will have to go back to look again. So I do have another case I'm working on that is ahead of this one in terms of time. But as soon as I finish that one, I'll be turning my attention to this one. You may or may not know the board takes a break in July. I'll certainly have this recommendation out in enough time for it to be heard by the board in early August. Thank you.
Thank you.